And hey, folks, welcome to this week's edition of Dawg Walk Talk. I'm your host, Jake Roos, as always, and with me from Dogs HQ, where my home is as well, the old man PT. How about it, Palmer Toms? Palmer, what's up, brother?
How you doing, Jake? I'm doing well over here in Athens. Just ready for another week of Georgia football. The Dogs looked really impressive on Saturday. I thought, I came away very impressed. Thinking that this team has a lot of potential. They showed a lot of signs of growth on Saturday, and excited to break it down with you tonight.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think Georgia really came through with a performance that, few people could argue with to open up that SEC schedule. Look, I did see some detractors. I'm not going to argue that. I mean, there were people who said, what's going on? These things are not hitting. I didn't feel that way at all about Georgia's performance on Saturday. I thought that was everything you could have expected and hoped for out of opening the SEC schedule. I mean, a dominant win. You win by 3 scores. I mean, what more could you want, right? That's my opinion. It felt like they dominated from the opening of the game as well. Watching it and just having that sense of, seeing what they were doing, how it was progressing. Maybe it was a little bit different in Sanford Stadium. I don't know. Palmer, you were in the press box. Did you ever get the sense that Georgia was not in control of this game, or that this was somehow a letdown in any way?
No, not at all. I mean, I think getting JT Daniels back to start the game was certainly big for momentum purposes. You could feel the energy that was there when his name came across the video board as the starter. There was a certain excitement that you could hear from that crowd, and it was a big crowd, I will say. For a game that ended up being a blowout, a 7:00 kickoff in Athens certainly always draws a good number of people out. And so, to start the game with him and, they march down the field 6 plays, 75 yards, touchdown on his first drive. Next time they get the ball, 6 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. It was about as good of a start as you could ask for. I think, maybe defensively, I think you probably would have wanted a little bit better of an effort. They did a good job of keeping South Carolina out of the end zone for the most part. But, I do think that there was some concerns there, especially in the secondary with some big plays that they gave up. And thinking back to that first drive for the Gamecocks, they converted on a 3rd and long with a long pass play down the sideline. South Carolina ends up going to Luke Doty at quarterback, and he made a big impact. But overall, I'm with you. I think there's not much that you can come away disappointed about from that kind of performance.
Yeah, and who knows? Is it a different game with Zeb Nolan in? I don't know. I doubt it. Personally, he was off to a decent start. Obviously, an early injury for him kind of sidelines him. I kind of felt for the kid. He was playing in front of his home crowd. His dad was there, dapped up in the Gamecocks gear. So, but at the same time, look, Georgia's offense was able to do what it did, and that couldn't be really reeled in by the Gamecocks defense. I think that's really the point that everybody has to take away from this is Georgia's defense doesn't miss a beat. I wrote that in my 3 keys. Once again, they come in 3 straight games, this defense looking like the number 1 defense in the nation, playing like that. I guess being there and being amongst it and seeing it live, did you feel like there was ever a point where the South Carolina offense was able to, get anything going, get any momentum or really just shift this game? Because watching it on TV, it did not feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was never really a time where South Carolina moved the ball on Georgia. It was more they hit on a big play here or there to flip field position to move the chains, but it wasn't like an extended drive. I'm looking at the stat sheet here. Their longest drive was the final drive of the game, which was against Georgia's some of Georgia's young guys, 12 plays, 78 yards, but how does it end up? Turnover on downs in 4th and goal. Georgia's defense held strong there. Outside of that, going against the ones, it was 7 plays, 56 yards, 7 plays, 29 yards. A couple of 6-play drives, but only one of them ended up in a touchdown, and that was late in the game. With Georgia's ones were still in there, so you can't say, well, the first team defense hasn't given up a score yet. They gave up one, and Amir Speed got beat deep. I think both of us noted this. If there's one concern for Georgia coming out of this game, it's the play of those cornerbacks against a talented wide receiver in Josh Vann. You want to see them play a little bit better, especially knowing the kind of challenges that they have ahead. Wan'Dale Robinson, Josh Ali, Cam Johnson next week for Vanderbilt. Arkansas's got some guys. It's a tough challenge, and Kirby Smart said so after the game. He said, hey, Josh Vann played really well, but we're going to have to play better because we're going to play guys just as good, if not better than him, the rest of the season. And so I didn't get the sense that Georgia's defense was giving up. I didn't get the sense that Georgia's defense was getting beat as much as they were, giving up a couple of big plays.
Sure. And that's going to happen. I think against SEC opponents, you're going to have to, it's a pick and choose. I said that going into this game for South Carolina. Figure out what you want to defend. Is it the run or the pass, right? And so you're going to have to determine, is that the direction you're going to go? Yes, they got beat on that long play. Josh Vann, an excellent receiver. I'm going to give some love to myself. I loved him out of high school. He's got solid hands right there. That kid can play. And showed that the other night. But you and I talked before we got on the podcast about this. A lot of people were saying the concern about Georgia is the offensive line and the ability to get push and the ability to get the running game going. I'm not as concerned about that as I was going into this game because I felt like they made another incremental step ahead. Was it ideal? No. Was it where Kirby Smart wants it to be? No, absolutely not. But the fact that they've taken a small step forward in that each week, I think bodes well. Any concerns when you're looking at this offensive line and this rushing game moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it off air a little bit and just said it's weird to watch Georgia football. I mean, both of us have watched for a little bit of a good bit of time. You've watched for a little bit longer than I have, but it's weird to see Georgia football being carried by its passing game. I mean, Georgia is a program that has been known for their running backs.
But isn't that what folks wanted? I mean, that's what fans have called for, is this idea of coming into the 21st century with these offenses that are able to score from wherever and be led by the wide receivers. I think that you have that somewhat in place, but at the same time, everybody wants to call back to that old Georgia style and that Kirby Smart initial style upon his hiring of being able to enforce your will through the running game. I think that what you saw last night had to be encouraging.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it's weird, but it is what Georgia fans have been asking for a long time. It's that jump that you saw from, LSU of old to LSU of 2019. Same thing with Alabama of old and Alabama that we've seen for several years now. They bring in an offensive mind and they make a big jump. Well, Georgia did that last season, bringing in Todd Monken. They didn't have the quarterback. They do have him now. And when they put JT Daniels in last year, this is what we saw. And I wrote up in my story last night, he's had 3 games of over 300 yards plus a 299-yard game, 3 games with 3 touchdowns. Last night, he hit on both marks. I think you're right. I think that this is exactly what Georgia fans want to see. I think you want to see a little bit more from the run game. You probably want to see more from Zamir White. You probably want to see more from James Cook. Really the entire group. I think, in our conversation earlier, it's the one thing that's a little bit frustrating if you're a Georgia fan watching this run game is that the distribution of carries is, you're seeing 8 carries to Zamir White, 10 carries to Kendall Milton. You want to get those guys carries. You've got a ton of talent in that room. You want to get them all carries, but at the same time, you want to let some guys, one guy, two guys get in a groove and really get a feel for it. It's really hard to feed 4 mouths.
Yeah, well, look, I think Georgia fans lived that out in the quarterback room against South Carolina when Stetson Bennett steps in. And by the way, we got a film study coming on Dogs HQ where I won't give the name away just yet, but we got an expert coming in to break the film down. And he says, listen, where he went with that ball was the right read. However, it was just an overthrow. I mean, then that's going to happen in some cases. Unfortunate play for Stetson Bennett. It puts it all back in JT Daniels' hands. He's able to shut it out. I mean, by the half, this thing is done. And you're not playing your best game. And this was the thing. I threw this out to Georgia fans on Twitter and said, how are you feeling about this team? Probably the most prescient point I thought was, you're not playing your best game right now. You're not playing with all your weapons. However, you're still winning SEC games by 3 scores against what are decent teams. I mean, UAB, by all accounts, one of the best non-Power 5 teams. You've got South Carolina, which, say what you want about their talent level and who they are, they're an SEC team. And then Clemson, you're able to pull one out against one of the top 10 teams in America at this point. So a lot of, I don't know, I'm not going to say there are concerns, but I think a lot of it should be eased by where you are in the season and what you've been able to do to this point.
Yeah, I think that you're left wanting to see a little bit more. Speaking with Kirby after the game, it felt like he wanted to see them finish the game a little bit better. Yeah. With the exception, if you look at Georgia's last touchdown, which came, midway through the third quarter, after that, they go interception, fumble, punt, and taking a knee to end the game. So you would have liked to see them finish the game a little bit better. Defensively, to set up those final 2 touchdowns, the 2 scores in the second half, they picked a pass off, they forced a fumble. Well, what did they do after that? They forced a punt, gave up a touchdown, their first of the season. And then ultimately, with the backups in, forced a turnover on downs. I felt like the defense finished out a little bit stronger than the offense. But like you said, I feel like that there's just, you want to see a little bit more, but you also have to feel encouraged knowing that there is more coming in terms of, guys that are going to be making their way back, guys that are going to be, getting back to full strength. You saw Kyrus Jackson back on the field last night, and he made some plays. I think that's encouraging to see him, back out there. He will continue to get in a better, in better shape, in a better, chemistry with JT Daniels. Hopefully for Georgia's sake, they'll see Darnell Washington back here before too long. That injury, he's out on the field ahead of games with no boot on. I would expect to see him, probably not this week against Vanderbilt, but I would expect to see him, before Florida, before maybe Auburn. It would be the, Arkansas or Auburn once you make that turn into October. Defensively, you've got Tyke Smith that's going to be making his way back. George Pickens potentially. I mean, he's out there on the sidelines as well. So, I think that there's a lot of guys that are getting healthy. There's help coming for Georgia, and it's not like they've needed it so far. They've fared pretty darn well without that help.
Listen to Palmer Thoms over here giving some folks some hope about George Pickens here soon. I can't say I disagree with you. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. When you get Darnell Washington in and you've got Brock Bowers 3 games in, 3 times the leading receiver. What more could you ask of a freshman tight end in the SEC? That's unheard of. Everybody needs to be given, Todd Monken his flowers right now, because if you wanted the tight end used, listen, through 3 games, you got it. This kid is taking the lead. He's that safety blanket that they've asked for, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that. Listen, there's really not a lot of ways to spin this. Georgia stomped a mud hole into South Carolina. It's what people expected. It's what happened. Georgia delivering again on the expectations surrounding them. And I think that that's important. But looking back on this game, who were the guys who really stood out to you, Palmer, and kind of, maybe earned some player of the week honors in your mind?
Yeah, you mentioned Brock Bowers there. I'm going to go with a different true freshman pass catcher, and that's AD Mitchell. I felt like this was coming. This was coming for, I predicted it against UAB. It didn't quite happen there. He had a better game against UAB than he did Clemson, but he's continued to progress, each and every week. I think if you look at his week 1 performance versus his week 3 performance, it's he's making, leaps and bounds of improvement. And, 4 catches, 77 yards, a 38-yard touchdown, his first of his career. He was excited. He was excited to have that happen. I think, the fans were excited to see that happen. I mentioned it when I was talking about Mitchell and his potential breakout game against UAB. I looked at George Pickens against, his freshman season. And, looking again, I'll make that comparison because I think that they're similar players where they're making an impact as a true freshman and they're, more jump ball 50-50 downfield threats than say a Dominic Blaylock was in the slot. Pickens had a great second, third game. He continued to make improvements. And so I think this is what you're going to continue to see from AD Mitchell. I'll give him my game ball player of the week for the South Carolina game.
All right. Palmer Tom's out here, everybody, saying that AD Mitchell, the next George Pickens. We have that on record.
A lot of Pickens talk tonight.
There's no question. Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, that's as great of a comparison I think as you can give anybody. Obviously, for me, I'm going to lean defense, Nolan Smith, and really what that speaks to me is not necessarily Nolan Smith. Yes, this was a huge breakout game, and it was a great time for it to happen to open the SEC schedule. But simultaneously, it's about this Georgia defense as a whole, where you've had guys step up each week. That first week, it was probably Nakobe Dean, right, against Clemson, 2 sacks on the week. Then you get Channing Tindall last week leading the team in tackles. And then Nolan Smith comes through with an incredible performance against South Carolina to open the SEC schedule. It really speaks to Georgia's depth. I think that that's the big takeaway we've got here. I mentioned it in 3 keys after the game. Georgia's defense has not missed a beat to this point. And you're waiting for that, I think, as a Georgia fan. When will the break come? But I don't know that it will. And Shane Beamer pointed after the game, somebody said, what is it that they do so well? He said, oh, they got 155 stars over there. They're fast, they're physical, they're big. I mean, these guys are playing at a level that you would expect out of what Kirby Smart and company have recruited to this point. And they've really been able to deliver on that. I think that the fact that you've had different guys sort of taking the lead each week, a huge sign to the success moving forward. Now, Palmer, I'm going to throw it to you to let you kind of take over these hosting capabilities. Georgia, though, on the week picks up a commitment right before that game happens. What was it? Thursday, I think, is when it broke. Georgia picks up Carlton Madden, CJ Madden, out of Cedar Grove High School, one of the top pass rushers in this class, a guy maybe a little bit underrated, but, a guy who's still very talented. Palmer, your thoughts first, and then I'll let you throw it back to me since that's my specialty.
Yeah, I had a couple conversations with Carlton this summer, and it was an interesting recruitment. I spoke with him early in the summer when he was previously committed to Colorado, was still committed there at that time, and was kind of coming onto the scene. He made several trips to Athens throughout the summer, and it felt like there was some smoke there, that there was potential that Georgia could make a move. He ends up decommitting soon after that conversation, and I'll be honest, I left my conversation with him feeling like there was a chance that decommitment was coming pretty soon. He kind of left the door open. And so, ultimately a couple months later, he's committed to the Bulldogs. I know that this is something that he's, if you look at his social media, this is something that he's dreamed about for a while. He put out a post where I think it was his JV football profile or something, where he said his dream college would be Georgia. And so, Jake, from the conversations you've had with him, you've seen him for a little while, being an in-state guy. What kind of comparisons would you give to him? And I guess what's his best skill set?
All right. So, when I'm looking at a player like this, he's almost on that. He's a slash player to me. He's one of those guys who, is he big enough to play that outside linebacker role, or is he a guy you want to pack some pounds on to maybe put a hand in the ground and let him pass rush? I think that he's probably that jack guy for you. And the best comparison I have is somewhere in between maybe Robert Beal and Nolan Smith in terms of physical build. I'm not saying that he's there or that fully fleshed out of a prospect yet, but I think he's a guy who can surprise some people. The Star Watchers are not impressed with this one. I get that. This is a 3-star guy. This is a guy who I think some people felt like they took a flyer on it to offset maybe some guys that had come before him. Your Eni White, Shamar Stewart, et cetera. Those 4 and 5-star guys who you want kind of crushing in on that end, Adam Anderson types, right? I think that this is a developmental prospect, but I do think that this is a kid who is hungry and he's got the size. And those are 2 things that you can't really replicate. Those are 2 things you can't really, put into somebody. He's not the biggest kid I've ever seen. There's no question about that. I mean, he's 6'2.5", 6'3". And that's where I kind of come from with the Beal comparison. And Nolan Smith's not about that same size. I mean, Nolan's playing about 6'2". He's probably at this point in his high school career, 235. So he's not going to be one of those 6'6", 230 guys like maybe in the same class with him, Darius Smith out of Appling County, who, sky's the limit for that kid. I think this guy is the limit for Carlton Madden, though, because he's a hard worker. He's a kid who's going to produce. I think he's a kid who's going to come in and work in hard, and he wants the opportunity. And also, Cedar Grove has been a really fertile recruiting ground for Georgia. You've been able to pull Justin Schaefer, who's been around the program for what feels like 10 to 15 years at this point. Notori Johnson was out of there. You've got some young guys in Kayan Lee who are down there. Kristen Miller in the 2022 class, along with this guy, is a guy that they want to reel in. And how impactful could that be? He's a top priority on the defensive line. Carlton Madden, to me, a guy who is, like I said, a developmental prospect. He's not a ready-made guy to throw out there. And I'm not saying that he can't make an impact as a freshman. I never say that about anyone. But he doesn't have those measurables and that speed that you might attribute to a guy who would come in and make that kind of impact. So I think that he's a kid who can come into this system and can be a role player. Do I know what the final read on this kid is? No, I don't. I don't think anyone does. But he wanted to be a Bulldog. He's got the measurables, and he's got enough speed, I think, to bend that edge. And I think that at worst case in this situation, you've got an incredible special teams player on your hands. If he turns into a world-class pass rusher who's able to affect SEC defense or offenses, all the better. No question about it. So I like the pickup for Georgia. I know that there are a lot of people out there who are questioning it. I don't question it. And I look at the success also, and I encourage people to do as well. Look at what Georgia's done with these 3-star prospects. Latavius Brenny's out on that field. Tate Crowder was a 2-star guy who was a previous running back. Monty Rice, a 3-star guy as well. I mean, they've been able to
Eric Stokes, a first-round draft pick.
Eric Stokes, no question about, they're able to take these guys to a higher level than many people would have ever projected they could be. I think maybe if you're talking about a knock on them, have they been able to develop the 5 stars in the same way? I don't know about that. That's another question for another day, and we'll get there in Dawg Walk Talk, I promise. But they have been able to take these guys who were not the most highly sought after or the most highly thought of recruits and turn them into integral parts of their defense. I think CJ Madden can do that for them as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. That if there's one thing that Kirby Smart and his staff does really well, it's identify some of those lesser known guys, some of those under the radar guys, especially in state. That they've done a really good job of that in the state of Georgia. Several of those guys we mentioned there are from the state of Georgia, and so good chance that Carlton Madden could be another one of those guys. Another thing that I do think is that you, if you're just a star watcher and you're looking at, hey, he's a 3-star, is he really worth it? You got to remember this kid didn't get to play his junior season of high school football. And there's a lot of development that happens during that season. Once you become an upperclassman, not only are you taking on leadership roles, but you're taking on filling bigger shoes on the field. And so he didn't have that opportunity making a transfer over to Cedar Grove. So this is really his first opportunity to get his feet wet at Cedar Grove.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen so far, he's doing pretty well in that role, taking on big shoes. And, there's been a significant increase in his capabilities from sophomore year to senior year. And that's exactly what you want to see, especially, with a guy that's not highly rated, but the Georgia might be taking a little bit of a chance on and feels pretty good about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no downside to this take, in my opinion. I mean, the position is at such a premium. The outside linebacker room is so important in this era of the game. Stack as many guys as you can in there. Is this kid the ready-made prospect that Adam Anderson was? No. However, he's got a lot of intangibles that don't come with a lot of those guys. Like you said, he came into his junior varsity season writing like, I want to be a Georgia Bulldog. He's grown into his body. He's like I said, almost 6'3" probably. He's a guy with speed. He's a guy who can crash that edge, and he's got great connections, and he's getting great coaching at Cedar Grove. So I think all of those factors work in his favor and make him a completely worthwhile take. I'm not going to knock Georgia for this one at all. This is a kid that makes all the sense in the world for me when it comes to the 2022 class.
Now, Jake, you gave me those hosting roles, and I'm not sure I'm going to give it back here. I'm going to ask you a quick question. A lot of big name recruits that were in Athens this past weekend to take in that atmosphere. Who do you think could be the next commit for Georgia? I know that there's a lot of names to watch. Several big names that were there for the Bulldogs. Who are a couple guys that you've got your eyes on that you would be paying attention to here as we roll into September and October?
All right. Well, I'm never giving you hosting duties again, is what this tells me. First off, to throw it back to me like that and put the onus on me. I think that probably they're due up here soon for some news from some guys. The guy I'm looking at probably most heavily over the course of the next couple of weeks is Oscar Delp. This is the window that he's kind of had projected for himself, and it wants to kind of go ahead and get his commitment out of the way. I think that Georgia is and has been the team to beat. I think that holds true. He's been to a couple games this year. He's seen what Georgia's doing. He's looking at Brock Bowers and saying, oh my God, I could be the next one of these guys. Are you serious? I think if that had not been the case, now maybe he's looking at other places. I think that he's probably, considering some other options, but I do think that Oscar Delp, the guy to keep your eyes on in these coming weeks, hasn't nailed down the date just yet, but I do think it's coming soon. He was in Athens this weekend, was in our Recruits React piece over at Dogs HQ. I encourage people to go read that, see what he had to say, and feel good about that. Thanks a lot, though, Palmer. All right. Vanderbilt on tap this week. What are you looking for out of Kirby Smart? Obviously, I'm sure he's going to come in and say he's got a lot of respect for these guys. As usual, feels good about them, tough team, well coached, etc. Where do you look for him to kind of put the focus on in practice this week?
Yeah, second straight first-year SEC head coach that they're going to be playing. Clark Lee leading that program at Vanderbilt. I think with Lee's background, you've got to look at the defense of the Commodores, and I don't know. I haven't gotten to see a ton of their games. I know that they dropped the week 1 game against East Tennessee, but they bounced back with a nice win on the road over Colorado State. They played Stanford this past weekend. I actually have not seen a score from that one.
They got rolled.
Yeah, I kind of thought that was going to be the case. So
they weren't unable to produce. I'll say that they did score points, but the defense gave up a lot of points also to Stanford. So Stanford by 3 scores in that game. So yeah, it doesn't look great.
Look, it's Vanderbilt week, and I don't think that they're going to be overlooking Vanderbilt, but I think a lot of what you're doing this week is in preparation for. I've said it before. I've said it before on this podcast, and I'll say it again. That October slate is looking really tough, especially with what Arkansas has done. Leading up to this game, coming in 3-0 so far. They've got Texas A&M this week. That's a big one. You knock off the Aggies in Jerry World, you could be looking at potentially a top 10 matchup, maybe definitely top 15. Auburn, they put up a good fight at Penn State on the road in that whiteout atmosphere. You've got Kentucky who did not look great on Saturday.
Palmer. Let me reel you in here. I'm going to play the Kirby Smart. We're focused on 1 week at a time. This is a good Vanderbilt team we have to play, and we have a lot of respect for them. All right. So how do you feel that the message is for Kirby Smart this week?
Hey, you nailed the impersonation there. So I think that, like you said, the focus is on Vanderbilt, and you want to use this game. First time that Georgia's going to go into a road atmosphere on the road. Obviously, they traveled to Charlotte for that neutral site matchup with Clemson. But I think that and I don't think Vanderbilt's going to be too intimidating of a road atmosphere. I know of a lot of dogs that are headed up there this weekend to partake in the festivities in Nashville. I will be up there, excited to be up there. I'm originally from there, so excited to make the trip back home, see some family, see some friends, and ultimately watch some football on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing. Look, it's another opportunity for Georgia to get some kinks worked out. I think that you ultimately would like to probably get Jack Podlesny maybe a couple of opportunities in this game. He was able to deliver against South Carolina when you needed him, but get that kicking game right. Punting game's where it needs to be. Defense is where it needs to be. Offense feels sound enough. Take another step forward in whatever regard you feel that is moving into this game and then moving into Arkansas, which is going to be a big game. But we're not talking about that yet. We're just chopping wood and we're focusing on who's ahead, and we got a lot of respect for the opponent. So I think that it should be an interesting week of preparation for Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart. I promise you he won't be talking about anything other than Vanderbilt this week in the Commodores. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. Any last thoughts for you tonight, PT?
Yeah, no, I think going back to what we said about the South Carolina game, a lot of growth that this team has shown over the course of the season so far. If you look around this college football world, there's a lot of teams that haven't shown that growth, that haven't shown up each and every week. And Georgia hasn't been tested by the toughest schedule so far. Especially post Clemson taking on a non-Power 5 team and then one of the lower tier teams in the SEC. But they've taken care of business. They're getting healthy. They're showing signs of improvement, and there's some young guys that are really showing signs of improvement. So looking forward to seeing what some of those young guys can do. And hey, one I'm really excited about seeing this week with Vanderbilt, 70-man travel roster. I think there's a lot that you can learn about a team and what these coaches really think about these guys based on, are you making the trip or are you staying home in Athens?
Ooh, look at this, man. That's a deep cut, but I appreciate that. I think that you're right. It's a really good indicator of how they feel about this team, the depth on this team, the guys that they feel create that depth. 70-man travel roster, very impactful. we'll be looking at that the rest of this week. No question about it. And you can bet it's going to be a big part of practice this week, which apparently we get to view. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So for myself and Palmer Toms over at Dogs HQ, this has been Dawg Walk Talk. We'll see you guys later this week to preview Vanderbilt.